unfair advantage automotive mastermind group meeting. Right. It takes a lot to say that all in one tongue, but I got to tell you, it's a fantastic event. This is my third time being here, and I love every minute of it. And the Sean Moffett Radio Show is here for you to learn what you need to know about business, about how to overcome, about how to learn the things that maybe you don't know, and maybe you need to know for your time in business today. The reason that I'm here to help you is I've been in business, 20 years in business, and I've seen the highs and I've seen the lows, and I want to teach you what you need to learn. You know, maybe you're a car dealer like who I'm in front of right now, and you're sitting there in Winston-Salem wondering, how the heck am I going to make my money? Or maybe you've always wanted to be a professional wrestler, but you didn't know how to do that. I'm here to tell you. And my guest today, believe it or not, is here to tell you as well. I have the distinct honor and privilege of interviewing someone who I've looked up to for years. And anyone who's listened to my show long enough, or friends of mine long enough, know I am a humongous wrestling fan. I don't know many bigger wrestling fans than me, and the ones who I do know who, if I was to be honest with myself, I would say, they probably are bigger wrestling fans than me. I would never actually tell them in person because, then that would just be a thing for them, and I couldn't do that. But I'm a big wrestling fan, and my guest today, his name is Zach Gowen, and he was too. Zach Gowen is a survivor. After Zach lost his leg to cancer at the age of 8, he went on to become the first ever one-legged professional wrestler. At the age of 19, he signed a 3-year contract with the WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment, and was featured prominently on their television show SmackDown, being involved in storylines, which are the different stories that get woven through the shows are the storylines. Kind of like a soap opera, but with wrestling. And he was working with guys like Hulk Hogan, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Brock Lesnar, and the man himself, Vince McMahon. Mr. McMahon. You're fired! I love that guy. And Zach became an instant inspiration to millions and millions of people around the world, proving that nothing is impossible. And I know that my listeners and the audience here have often felt that there's lots that's impossible, and you're a living testament, Zach, that it's not. Now, not all life is rosy, is it? It's not for you, it's not for me, and it wasn't for Zach. You see, after being released from his contract, Zach hit rock bottom in his life. The pain of having no dad growing up, and feelings of never quite fitting in, and that he had lost his identity after losing his dream job, all came together to create the perfect storm that sent Zach into a downward spiral. He found his answer, and his answer were drugs and alcohol. And many of you have found your answers in drugs and alcohol as well. And he soon found himself mentally and spiritually bankrupt, as I have, and I know many of my listeners have as well. And shortly after enduring this complete state of hopelessness, Zach experienced what he calls a spiritual intervention. This act of providence sparked what would become the fire in his soul. And that fire now illuminates all who he comes in contact with on his various platforms, and that is for sure. Whether it's on stage, in speaking engagements, or in the ring, wrestling, or on TV, or on his DVD, Finding Zach Gowen, which is a fantastic watch. You absolutely must get this DVD. Zach's message is really simple. His message is simple. Trust God, clean house, help people. Zach now lives in Detroit with his fiancée Kelly and his oldest son Nolan. Please welcome Zach Gowen.
Follow that introduction, we should just go home now.
Okay, we're done. Ding, ding, ding. Ring the bell.
Thank you very much. It's very great to be here and to share some time and space with you, Sean, and you people here at Unfair Advantage. It's very important for me to start this interview off on the right foot.
I'm sure that you do that one quite a bit. And it sort of hangs around the room for a while. And then, 'cause I think people don't really know if they're supposed to laugh.
I know.
Am I allowed to laugh at the handicapped guy? Like, is that actually a thing?
Well, I have to do that when I go to middle schools and high schools and I talk to these kids and I come out and they see the fact that I have one leg and there's automatically a lot of tension in the room.
Right.
And for me to break that tension, I have to tell them it's okay to laugh, because if you live a life that I've lived, I can do one of two things, and that's either cry or laugh. And I thank God today I have the choice to choose to laugh today.
That's good. I choose to laugh too. I just laughed at you. Now, you have a story that's unlike any I've ever heard before. I mean, we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about, whether it was 8 years old getting cancer, what's that like? Or not having a father growing up, what's that like? Or knowing that you had achieved a dream and then having it taken away from you, and what's that like? And all of those things seem to have a theme to them. And it's the universe conspiring to maybe push you further and see what you're really made of. And I know my audience, my listeners, and the people at home struggle overcoming things themselves and often find themselves not being able to do it. What was the lesson that you learned earliest from losing your leg at 8 years old to cancer that has stuck with you, that my listeners and the live audience here could take away as something that would be a mantra or your insight as to how to get that going?
It's simple. It's action. For me today, action is the answer. It's black and white. There's no middle ground. Either I sit at home and I feel sorry for myself and I'm bitter and I'm angry at the world and I'm angry at God for making me how I am, or I get my butt off the couch and I take action. And I'm at the most peace within myself when I'm engaged in action, and that action usually involves being of service and helping other people.
Zach Gowen, the first one-legged professional wrestler on the show, off the radio show. Zach, you've lived with a lot of that anger, haven't you? I mean, you really had a time in your life where that anger took over you. And I know for me, there was a time in my life when anger took over me as well, and it made a lot of bad decisions really easy to make. And I know that people in the audience and my listeners at home also struggle with bad times in their lives. Not everyone loses their leg to cancer or gets fired from their dream job. Some people lose a marriage, some people lose a child, some people lose a fortune, some people lose themselves. What was that providence? You called it a spiritual intervention, a providence that entered your life and gave you a passion. What was it?
It was a state of hopelessness. It got so bad for me, and I stayed so many years marinating in this bitterness and this anger and my fears that I absolutely became hopeless. The outlook for my future was not good at all. It got to a point where in my active addiction and alcoholism, I didn't care whether I lived or died. I knew that I couldn't go on feeling how I felt anymore, and whether if that was recovery and living this wonderful life of service and being sober, or if it was death, it didn't matter to me which came first. And that is an absolute state of pure hopelessness, and it took what it took to get to that point before I was beaten enough to be able to surrender. It's a paradox, but I had to surrender to win, basically.
And it's interesting to me, Zach, that your entire life revolved around the fact that you were getting beaten every day. I mean, it's kind of, you kind of laugh about it a little bit, I guess, but in reality, you would go into the ring, get the crap kicked out of you, right? Whether you win or lose, you still take the bumps. And then you go out of the ring and continue to do it to yourself. How long did that go on?
Every day of my life until I was 26 years old.
Wow. I am certain that there are people listening right now who know that story, and not because it's yours, because it's theirs too, And what was that moment where you woke up and said, I can't do this anymore?
I don't know. I really have, the whole idea is so fuzzy. It got really weird for a long time leading up to that. But like I said, it just became the idea of I can't go on like this anymore. And something's, I don't know what it was, man, an act of providence, that's the only way I can describe it, where I said to myself, you know what, Zach, I've overcome this, and I've done this, and I've done this, but I don't have the answer for this. My mom doesn't have the answer, my girlfriend, my best friend, nobody has the answer for this. Then what is the answer?
And we're going to figure out what that answer is on the other side of the break. I'm here with Zach Gowen, the first ever one-legged professional wrestler, live from the Unfair Advantage Automotive Mastermind in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm Sean Moffett. This is the Sean Moffett Show on the Lifestyle Talk Radio Network. My friend Zach Gowen. Zach is the only one-legged wrestler ever in the history of the universe.
Not true.
No?
There's one other.
Did you put a mask on?
Up there. No, I'm the first. I'm the first, but I'm proud to say I believe I opened that door for another guy or two to come along.
That's crazy. And I want you to visit Zach's site. It's Zach Gowen. Zach is spelled Z. I was going to say Z because I'm Canadian, right? But ZACHGOWEN.com. Go there, buy his DVD, and read his story. It's amazing. Now, before the break, Zach, we were talking a little bit about that moment when you knew that things had to change, and you couldn't really pinpoint. You just realized that it was the time. There are crossroads and points, I think, in all of our lives where, for me, there were two. The first was when I was 25. And I had a nervous breakdown and realized that the sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle that I was living, I couldn't live anymore. It was killing me. And I liked to call it a quarter-life crisis at the time. And that was way before John Mayer ever coined the phrase in that song. And the second time was at 35, when I finally admitted that I had been sexually abused and was able to start talking about that. Other people started saying, wow, you know, I never realized, and this happened to me, or that happened to me. You have a story where there was a young man who saw you, who was inspired by you, and you found out about that inspiration while you were in the depths of your own despair. Would you mind telling the listeners in the audience a little bit about that story?
Yeah, that's awesome. And this is the guy on my shirt. I'm this guy with the machine gun leg, and this is my partner, Gregory Iron, and he has the machine gun arm. Gregory Iron has cerebral palsy, and when he was 16 years old, he was, as we were talking about before, sitting on his couch feeling sorry for himself, marinating in that self-pity, and he saw me on television doing a moonsault on The Big Show. And at that moment, that inspired him to follow his dream, and his dream was to become a professional wrestler. Fast forward a number of years, and I'm at a crossroads in my career because I'm trying to, man, through the addiction and the alcoholism, I've burned every single bridge in my industry. And after I got clean and sober and I started on this path of recovery, part of that was to try to rebuild my career, right? So I'm sitting at this crossroads, and I'm not where I am. I'm not where I think I should be in my career. I'm not making the money, and I'm not wrestling for as many people as I think I should be, considering how talented and great I am, right? And so, I'm thinking, should I put this effort into wrestling, and should I go into something else? Should I, what should I do? And I hear a podcast of all things of Greg, and he shared his story about how I inspired him to become a professional wrestler. And when I heard that, bam, something else clicked, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That for a moment, I got rid of my own BS, right? And I was able to pull down my ego and my pride, and I saw the fact that my story could affect somebody in such a profound way. And I thought, man, what a responsibility I have, and I have to reach out to Greg. So I reached out to him, and I thanked him for sharing that. And in turn, he inspired me to keep going with wrestling. And now, through various serendipitous events, we team up. We're the Handicap Handguns, and that's the name of our tag team. And we also do speaking engagements. But for some reason, my story is powerful, and his story is powerful in of itself. But for some reason, together, the whole is better than the sum of the parts. And it's a really great thing we have going on now.
Zach Gowen with me on the Sean Moffett Radio Show. And the sum of the parts is a great, I think, translation into business. You know, a lot of times you can get your dream job. You know, I know a lot of my listeners have gotten their dream job and then they don't have it anymore. You know, you meet the perfect person and they're everything for you, and then they're not. Or, you know, you've amassed a fortune, right? And all of the things that go along with having amassed a fortune go away with the fortune, you know. And to be able to have someone come to you and let you know that you've inspired them to do something, and then beginning to work together with them. I've always said to my business clients and to my listeners, find people to surround yourself with that can help you be the best you and bring the best out of you, so that when you get in those places where you lose your job and you think you shouldn't have, or you lose your spouse and you think you shouldn't have, or you lose your fortune and you think you shouldn't have, and you get to that wallowy, desperate, horrible, ugly place, that those people can be around you to bring you out. I mean, there were, as I read your story, there were countless people who were trying to intervene and help you before you hit that rock bottom. And I think your response to them was much like the response of the audience and the people here. Tell them your response to people as they began to try and help you.
Well, when people that I cared about and cared about me, and they tried to come into my life and tried to help me, I pushed them away. I did not, and I took that as an act of betrayal. You know, all I wanted to do, the only thing I wanted to do, and this is sad, but this is the absolute truth. All I wanted to do was to drink, do drugs, and make it work. And whatever make it work meant, whether it was my job or my relationships or whatever it was, I just wanted my cake and I wanted to eat it too. And when people came in my life and they said, Zach, you know, we love you and we're concerned about you and we don't want you to die, quite frankly, I took that as an act of betrayal, and to me that was a threat. They were threatening to take away from me my solution, which at the time was drugs and alcohol.
What were the drugs that you were choosing to do? Was it as a result of the painkillers, or was it a result of something else?
It was a result of everything, man. I don't drink or use drugs because my dad took off when I was 4, because I had cancer at 8 and I lost my leg, or because I got fired from the WWE. I drank and I did drugs because I like the effect produced by drinking and drugging, right? And so my drug of choice was more. You know, if 1 was good, 2 was even better, and 3 was even better than that. And then that's kind of how, you know, once I put the first one in me, it awakens the obsession of the mind, man. And once that takes over, all bets are off. I'll run over my own mother to get to it, you know, to where I need to go.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, I know I do. I personally completely understand that, and I think specifically, it's odd in a sales world. And we're at a sales conference right now, certainly not a drug addiction conference or an alcohol addiction
Kind of
conference.
feels like it though.
It does. Only because of the conversation.
No, of course, yeah.
Right, but
clarify that.
Yeah, let's clarify that. But I think, you know, salespeople, generally speaking, are very all the way or all the way, right? Very much all in and passionate and all in the other way. And to hear that you extremely dove into that is not a surprise. And I'd like to pick that up after the break and talk a little bit more about how you cope, so that the people listening and in the audience can maybe get some how-tos on when things get extreme, maybe not with alcohol and drugs, but when things get extreme, what are some real coping mechanisms and tools we can use to further our lives and our experiences in that service of others. And we're gonna get to that on the other side of the commercial break. I'm with Zach Gowen and I'm Sean Moffett. This is the Sean Moffett Radio Show, live from Charlotte, North Carolina at the Unfair Automotive Mastermind Group. And we will see you on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. Session. I'm here with Zach Gowen. Zach is the first, and not only, but the first ever one-legged professional wrestler, but Zach is way more than that. In the time that I've gotten to know you, you're way more than that. That's just what you do, you know? It's not who you are. It's really cool. Now, before the break, you and I were talking about going from sort of one extreme to another. I know for me personally, I live that way. I make decisions that way, and I like to think I make the decisions the right way. You know, that if I'm going to do something all the way, that I do the right thing all the way. But certainly my life has not been a series of great decisions. It's been a series of learning experiences. I guess we'll put it that way.
Opportunities for growth.
That's right. Yeah. Every time I got fired, they always told me, "Yeah, we're going to free you up to go do something that you're more suited for." You know, that's great. That's great. Yeah, exactly. Opportunities for growth. But you know, I've found a lot of salespeople, business people, entrepreneurs, those who work for directly for the paycheck, right? Like you go in the ring, you put your sweat down, in return you get a commission, right? I bet. And salespeople, business owners, entrepreneurs do exactly the same thing. So what were some of the things, the tools that you learned, the coping mechanisms that stopped you from swinging so wildly in that pendulum of extremity that allowed you to stay focused and honed and tuned in?
I'm so happy to be off that pendulum or that merry-go-round, you know, that can be
For
my
sure.
emotions. And what the answer for me is balance. It's got to come from a balance, right? I have to balance my home life, my support groups, my work life. I have to exercise. I have to eat right. You know, not so much for the wrestling, but for my mental health. You know, because if I'm on this pendulum and I'm going crazy and I don't know up from down, then how can I be of service to anybody, right? And I believe my sole purpose here on earth is to be of maximum service to God and to the people around me. And so if I can't be of service, then I can't be a good father, I can't be a good husband, I can't be a good worker. And from that, the foundation for all of that is balance. I have to have balance.
I've heard a trainer speaker say recently that balance is for babies. What would you say to that?
I'm a 6'1" baby.
I like that. I'm a 6'3" baby. So how about that? Yeah, I like that balance. I mean, it can't be 100 miles an hour all the time. No, it can't. Good. So you got balance in your life. You're working, and as things begin to grow and change, and what were some of the things that you had never recognized or realized before, that after the fog clears and you've been through and you find a bit of balance, because it does take time, what were the experiences like? What did things smell like? What did they look like? What was life, how different was it for you?
It's been incredibly amazing. I didn't have an introspective thought until I was 26 years old. Right? Because I think it's the reason that my childhood was so painful. You know, my dad taking off to cancer and all that, it was too hard to look at. And once the drugs and alcohol were removed, I had the opportunity to really look at what was going on. So the problem wasn't the drugs and alcohol, the problem was me.
Right.
And the problem was what was going on with me. And so until I could have enough courage or enough faith to look, or enough hope to look, I'm sorry, I keep breaking this down.
That's okay.
To look at myself for the first time, that's when the true revelation came, man. And that's when I was able to drop the resentments, and I was able to drop the guilt and the shame and all of that, and be able to move forward and move on.
Good. Zach Gowen with me on the Sean Moffett Show. Zach, you talk a lot about being of service to people. And being of service to people is kind of a catchphrase in the automotive industry, and it's also a bit of a catchphrase in the sales industry, right? Like before 2008, before the economic meltdown happened, took a lot of sort of lip service and paid it to customer satisfaction and exceeding expectations, and I never did it. But I said I did it. And I know a lot of you listening didn't do it, and said you did, and still don't do it, and think you do, and then blame everyone else when your results are poor. What does it mean to Zach Gowen to be of service?
I have to. It's paramount. You know, that
Why?
it's a
Why is it?
priority.
Why?
Because if I'm of service, that means I'm I'm not in the crap storm that's going on in my head.
Right.
That's the only way that I know how to get outside of what's going on in my head is if I'm engaged in your issue and I'm helping you out. That's the only way.
So how could someone who's maybe listening in Chicago or in Pennsylvania, and they're sitting in a retail store of some kind, and they haven't talked to anybody all day, the phone hasn't rang. They're wondering what they're going to be able to do next. How do they actually get out of their head and put the other person first? Is there a thing you do? Is there a mantra? How do you change that personality from me first to you first?
Action. You take action. You got to have smart feet before you get a smart head. And that's what I've come to realize.
That's one of those things that they call it a writer downer here. You got to have smart feet before you have.
Or in my case, a smart foot.
Oh man, can you say that again? You gotta have smart.
You gotta have smart feet before you get a smart head. Simple as that. I can't think my way into a moment of gratitude or serenity. I have to take action.
Right. And now, would you suggest then that you find yourself living in a disposition or an attitude that is grateful all the time? Do you look for opportunities to serve, or did they sort of find their way to you?
No, I have to look for them because instinctively I don't want to be of service. I'm a very self-centered, very fear-based individual.
Right.
The last thing I want to do, and here's another writer downer. This phrase changed my life back in February of 2010, as we were talking about earlier. I heard the phrase, don't do what you want to do and do what you don't want to do. And when I heard that phrase, don't do what you want to do and do what you don't want to do, that blew me away. And that's exactly, I wake up and I say that to myself because I don't want to make phone calls and I don't want to see how you're doing. I don't want to say hi to the front desk hotel lady. Because I'm caught up in what's going on with me. I don't care. But if I force myself to, if I keep those smart feet, then the results just keep coming in and it kind of perpetuates itself in a positive motion. Zach
Gowen on the Sean Moffett show. That positive movement forward is a choice without question. And I talk to lots of salespeople and business owners, and I say to them, if you want to be successful, there's only one thing that matters, and it's put another first. And far too often when I have found that when you get paid based on what you do, your focus becomes you. And the focus on someone else actually winds up being far more profitable. It's not always just necessarily monetary profit, but it's, as you and I spoke about earlier, it's that soul thing, right? That when your soul's a mess, everything else is a mess, right? How did you write your soul in order to be able to be in the place you are now, Zach?
It's unbelievable, man. A lot of trial and error.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I did a lot of things wrong, but like I said, opportunities for growth, and the biggest thing for me is to not beat myself up, because that's what I really want to do. Anytime I do something bad or make a mistake, I want to, say, you should have done better, you should have done this. But now I look at it and I see it for what it is, and now I know what to do better next time. What I'm trying to do now is eliminate the word should from my vocabulary. It brings nothing but guilt and shame, and quite frankly, I don't have time for that.
So what is the piece of advice around that the listeners and the business people and those who are watching online right now and will hear the show about it, how do you get past the should? I know you're going to say, take action. Right? Give me an example of the thing that Steve, right now in Pittsburgh, can go out and do to ensure that he's putting other people first and making that soul thing happen.
Well, it becomes a habit. It's not one thing, it's not two things, it's 10 things, it's 15 things, it's 20 small things throughout your day. And once that momentum, because the hardest one to do is the first one, right? The hardest one to do is say hello, how you doing, how can I be of service? But once you do it over, and you do it over and over and over again, and the snowball of positivity and gratitude just comes with it. And with that comes the balance to allow you to be of service, to allow you to be a great father, a husband, and a great worker.
Amazing. Now, on the other side of the break, I want to touch a little bit on your work in schools, and you go out and talk to people about these different things. And I know there is such a translation between the wrestling business and what you're doing, and the sales business and the sales industry, because if you are not selling your crowd, right, and showing an enthusiastic, authentic desire to be there, they're not going to feel it, they're not going to believe it, they're not going to buy your merchandise. And I believe the same is true for salespeople and business people, regardless of what the industry is. We're going to get into that on the other side of the break. I'm Sean Moffett with the amazing Zach Gowen on the Sean Moffett Radio Show, live from Charlotte at the Unfair Automotive Mastermind Group on the Lifestyle Talk Radio Network. Mastermind Group. I'm here with my good friend, Zach Gowen, who is the first one-legged wrestler in professional wrestling history, and I would say the history of sport. The first professional one-legged wrestler in the history of sport. Now, many of my listeners and people in the room are in business and have been in business for a while, and one of the most painful things that happened over the last 4 or 5 years was the Great Recession. A lot of business people lost their jobs, lost their fortunes, lost their self-worth, right? Because a lot of us, you and I and the listeners, we wrap our self-worth up in who we are seen to be, right? And I know I've lost jobs and it's spiraled me out of control. And you said during the break to our live audience that your struggles with substance abuse didn't actually start deeply penetrating your life until after you were fired from the WWE. And I know that many of the listeners and people in the room have been fired from positions before. Tell me a little bit about, at 20 years old, 23 years old, what it was like to get fired from your dream job, how you handled it, and how people listening to you right now, Zach, could learn from that and what they should learn and how to handle things of that nature.
Well, it was one of the most challenging times of my life for me, because I was so emotionally immature, and I didn't know who I was at 20. And I'm not sure how many of us here knew who we were at 20 years old.
I did, for sure.
But I'm a WWE superstar, right? I'm on TV and I'm traveling the world and I'm hanging out with Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper, and I'm doing all sorts of things I probably shouldn't be doing, right?
Right.
And it's an amazing lifestyle. So I started to believe that. I started to believe that I was Zach Gowen, WWE superstar. And I thought, okay, well, this is who I am. This ain't bad. I make all right money, and the ladies are starting to look at me for the first time in my life. This, you know what I mean? Like I can get used to this.
Yeah.
But then they fired me. They pulled that rug right out from underneath me. And when that happened, I completely lost my identity. I had no idea who I was because the one thing that I could finally grasp onto and I could sink my claws into was no more. It was gone. The money was gone. The fame was gone. The girls stopped coming around when those two things left. And so the only thing that made me feel complete or whole or comfortable in my own skin to be able to sit on stage or get into a ring or to talk to people was drugs and alcohol. And so that's why it was my solution, because it worked. It worked really well for a long time. And it, obviously, my solution at some point along the way became the problem, and that's when I lost my mind. But yeah, it was one of the most challenging times of my life.
How long did it take for you to get fired and then get back into the ring?
Probably a year. I think I took a year to myself, and I had offered. And the thing, that's not what you should do. When you get fired from WWE, you have to hit the independent circuit right away, because you're never going to be hot. You're coming off TV, and everybody wants to see you. But I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed that I got fired from my dream job that I couldn't perform on a smaller stage. My ego.
For sure. Hey, Zach. People in this room, my listeners right now, are saying, hey, I've been through the same thing. I got fired from a job, and I actually started my business to go give a giant middle finger to the people who fired me. And the thing is that, if you get fired from your job, the first thing you should do is go out and get another job. And I did similarly to what got waited, and I went and created my own thing so that I could not work and look like I was, and you were off for a year. I like that. Get back in the ring right away.
Right.
Yeah. And so once you were back at it, did things start to get better?
No, things got worse. It just got worse from there because I was performing on these smaller stages, and I was miserable because I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be back in the WWE, so I couldn't appreciate what was being. I'd wrestle in front of 500 people when I really want to wrestle in front of 20,000 in front of national television.
Right.
And so I couldn't give those 500 people my attention, and I wasn't grateful for being there. And I think the fans sensed that. I think the promoters sensed that too. And the work started drying up because I wasn't fun to deal with because I was miserable. But you wouldn't be good to deal with either if you're miserable going into your job every day.
For sure.
You know what I mean? So so that was the case of me trying to try to find myself and find my place, but knowing deep down inside that I'm absolutely miserable.
And there are a lot of folks listening right now who are sitting in offices and retail spaces and showrooms who work with that guy or gal, who work with that person who, they walk in the room and suck the life out of it, right? And the thing is that a lot of times it's you and you don't even know. How do you know when it's you when you don't even know?
It's $1 million question right there.
You're the $1 million man. Let's go. Let's hear the answer.
Unbelievable. I think it's when you can't get any work.
There you go.
And that's what it is. And it got to a point where towards the end I was so unreliable and I was so, it got to a point where I'm from Detroit, right? And I would get booked in Indiana, maybe 2.5 hours away at a small county fair or something. And, they once cut me a check for $20,000 after I wrestled one match, right? And it got to a point where the promoter would call me and he'd say, Zach, I'd like you to come down and wrestle in Indiana. And I'd say, okay, what's up with the pay? What's going on with it? And he'd say, well, I have $40 and I have 8 blanketed for you.
Wow.
And I'd say, I'd be there. And I would.
Wow. Now, your story, we could talk about your story forever, and it's a story of redemption and overcoming. And it's a story that I think a lot of people need to hear and a lot of people need to see. Where can they go, in the last minute, where can they go to connect with you, to learn about your story, and to really dig into those points that I think are transcendent for all of us, that my listeners need to hear, that I needed to hear for sure, and that you've lived out?
Go to my website, zachgowen.com, and from there you can interact with me through various platforms of social media, and I interact with everybody. And, I also have the DVD, the documentary on sale just released, Finding Zach Gowen. You can get all the information on the website. I exist as a performer because of the direct support from you guys, and I'm strictly independent, and this is how I make my living, and you know what, it's a great life to live, so thank you very much for all your support.
And that's ZACHGOWEN.com. Go there right now, buy the DVD, it's fantastic, you gotta get the DVD. Zach, thanks for being on the Sean Moffett Show, it's been an absolute total pleasure. I'm Sean Moffett, thanks for listening. You can visit me on my website at themoffittcompany.com. Thank you to Tracy Myers and Troy Turbo Spring for having me here and at the Unfair Automotive Mastermind Group. And until next time, live out loud.